I'm Wrecker Rick, and you're watching Murphy's Diesel, and we're in Wilcox, Arizona, folks.
Rick Murphy, known to many as Wrecker Rick, has become a familiar name to anyone who watches heavy-duty recovery videos on YouTube. Hundreds of thousands of viewers have seen him drive the Hellboy straight into situations others avoid, pulling vehicles out of deep ravines, rescuing families stranded in snowstorms, and taking on jobs that many companies refuse. Murphy's Diesel, founded in 2014, has grown into 3 locations and generates hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual revenue. In the public eye, Rick is the man who shows up when a situation feels completely hopeless. But behind that image are wounds few people see: exhaustion, life-threatening risks, and pressure that never seems to let up. Now, at this point in his life, Rick is beginning to reveal the whole truth, and the story behind the spotlight is shocking enough to leave many people stunned. Hard beginnings. The foundation of tragedy. Rick Murphy and his wife, Nikki, founded Murphy's Diesel in 2014 with almost no financial safety net. They did not have investors, large loans, or a backup plan. What they had was skill, endurance, and a willingness to accept work that others refused. In the beginning, the shop focused on basic diesel repairs, including engines like the 7.3-liter Power Stroke. The jobs were often complicated and time-consuming, yet Rick rarely turned anyone away. If a truck needed fixing, he found a way to take it in, to keep the business alive. Rick and Nikki made a decision that defined those early years. They moved into a toy hauler trailer and lived there for nearly 3 years. The space was small, privacy was limited, and daily comfort was not guaranteed. Every dollar they saved went back into the company, whether for tools, parts, or rent. There was no real sense of stability. A slow month could threaten everything they had built. Starting a new diesel business in Kingman, Arizona also meant stepping into a competitive environment. Established shops already had loyal customers and stronger financial footing. Some competitors questioned whether the Murphys could survive. Others doubted a small operation could handle serious mechanical work. Rick answered that doubt with effort. He worked longer hours, took more calls, and focused on building trust one customer at a time. But the sacrifice came with a quiet cost. Financial uncertainty became part of daily life. Rest became secondary to survival. Instead of avoiding risk, Rick learned to operate inside it. As Murphy's Diesel slowly gained recognition, new pressure replaced the old uncertainty. Rick built his reputation on honesty, and that often meant completing jobs before payment was guaranteed. Insurance companies delayed claims. Paperwork moved slowly. Meanwhile, bills continued to arrive. Over time, unpaid invoices reportedly climbed toward $500,000. The weight of those numbers never disappeared. Employees needed wages. Equipment required constant maintenance. Fuel costs rose without warning. Rick pushed himself through long workdays because refusing jobs felt more dangerous than accepting them. Each completed recovery strengthened the company's name, but each delay in payment tightened the financial strain. There were moments when the situation felt close to financial self-destruction. Still, Rick did not step back. Helping stranded drivers mattered to him. Keeping his word mattered even more. Reputation became the currency he protected at all costs. During this period, the company began shifting beyond simple repairs. Calls for towing and recovery increased, and Rick recognized an opportunity to grow. Expanding into heavy recovery required more than confidence. It demanded specialized equipment, advanced skills, and significantly higher insurance coverage. The financial stakes rose immediately. One of the boldest moves was investing in Hellboy, a heavily upgraded 1969 Peterbilt built for extreme recovery work. The truck allowed Murphy's Diesel to accept larger and more dangerous jobs. It also introduced new expenses. Maintenance was constant. Premiums were high. One serious mechanical issue could erase months of profit. Yet Rick developed a pattern that would follow him throughout his career. When the phone rang with a difficult call, his answer was usually yes. Overturned semi-trucks, vehicles trapped off-road, crashes during severe weather. Jobs others avoided gradually became his specialty. Growth brought recognition, but it also locked risk into the foundation of the business. Danger was no longer occasional. It became routine, looking back. The tragedy of Rick Murphy's story did not begin with a single dramatic accident. It started in these early years, shaped by sacrifice, financial pressure, and relentless responsibility. The same decisions that built Murphy's Diesel into a trusted name also ensured that risk would remain a permanent part of his life. Career growth and reputation. The accumulation of risk. By 2017, Murphy's Diesel was no longer a small repair shop struggling to survive. The business had begun to expand, driven by Rick Murphy's reputation for reliability and his refusal to walk away from difficult jobs. What started as a single location gradually grew into 3 operating shops between 2017 and 2023. The company moved beyond standard diesel repair and positioned itself as a serious heavy recovery service. One of the most important milestones was securing contracts connected to law enforcement to help clear sections of Interstate 40 after major accidents. These were not routine calls. Many involved overturned semi-trucks, blocked lanes, spilled cargo, and dangerous roadside conditions. Responding quickly was critical because every hour of closure affected traffic and public safety. Rick understood that these contracts signaled trust. Authorities were relying on his team when situations became urgent. Revenue increased as the company took on larger jobs, but the financial pressure did not disappear. Expansion meant hiring more employees, maintaining a growing fleet, and carrying high-risk insurance policies. Payroll deadlines were fixed regardless of how quickly clients paid. Equipment failures could halt operations without warning. Growth made Murphy's Diesel more visible, yet it also raised the cost of staying operational. Success was no longer just about working hard. It required constant financial balance. Around the same time, another force began shaping Rick's career. YouTube. Videos showing dramatic recoveries started attracting large audiences. Viewers watched Hellboy pull crushed vehicles upright, drag heavy trucks out of snow-packed ditches, and stabilize loads that looked impossible to move. Some clips spread quickly, drawing hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, of views. The exposure brought recognition far beyond Arizona. Drivers began requesting Murphy's Diesel by name. For many people, Rick became the face of heavy recovery. But the income from online views was unpredictable. Algorithm changes could reduce visibility overnight. A viral video did not guarantee steady earnings the following month. Behind the scenes, Nikki played a critical role in keeping everything organized. She coordinated calls, managed schedules, handled paperwork, and helped oversee the growing demands of the business. Work hours stretched into personal time. Phones stayed on during dinners. Plans were often interrupted by emergency calls. The boundary between work life and home life slowly faded. Fame created a new kind of pressure. When people recognized Rick as the one who could solve extreme problems, they expected him to answer every call. Vacations became uncertain. Quiet weekends became rare. The same visibility that built trust also made it harder for him to step away. Meanwhile, the daily reality of recovery work remained physically dangerous. Every scene required fast but precise decisions. Rick had to calculate vehicle weight, assess unstable ground, identify anchor points, and predict how tension would shift once cables tightened. A small miscalculation could cause equipment to snap or vehicles to roll unexpectedly. One recovery that captured public attention involved a Winnebago that had fallen nearly 50 feet down a steep embankment. 14 companies reportedly declined the job due to the risk. Rick accepted it. The operation demanded patience and exact positioning. Hours passed as he adjusted angles and monitored strain on the lines. When the vehicle finally reached solid ground, it reinforced his reputation as someone willing to face what others avoided. But each success carried an invisible cost. Long hours in freezing temperatures drained physical strength. Adrenaline masked fatigue until the work was done. Mentally, the exposure to constant danger accumulated. Even experienced operators feel fear. They simply learn to function despite it. Still, Rick continued to answer the phone. Responsibility played a large role. Employees depended on the company. Drivers depended on his arrival. Authorities depended on his efficiency. Saying no became increasingly difficult. Over time, a pattern emerged. The very achievements that elevated Rick Murphy also increased the weight he carried. Expansion created financial obligations. Public recognition created constant demand. Dangerous recoveries became routine rather than exceptional. Success had not removed risk from Rick's life. It had multiplied it, quietly transforming his reputation into a burden he could never fully set down. Major tragic events. Breaking points. The risks that had followed Rick Murphy for years eventually stopped being abstract. They became personal, immediate, and impossible to ignore. Several events between 2024 and 2025 forced him to confront a reality he had long pushed aside. Danger was no longer limited to job sites. It was now reaching the people he loved most. In February 2024, a dense layer of fog settled over Interstate 40, sharply reducing visibility for drivers. Nikki was on the road with their daughter, Indy, when conditions suddenly worsened. Vehicles slowed. Brake lights blurred into the gray air. Then a truck appeared, too fast and too close, with little time to react. Nikki steered off the roadway and into a ditch to avoid a direct collision. The maneuver likely prevented something far worse, but the moment carried real terror. Metal shifted. Tires fought for traction. Indy was inside the vehicle as it all unfolded. Rick was not there. He received the call instead. For a man used to arriving at accident scenes and taking control, the experience was different when he was forced to wait for information. Minutes stretched. Details came slowly. He could not calculate angles or secure cables. He could only listen. Nikki survived, but the emotional shock lingered. Incidents like this do not end when the vehicle stops moving. Adrenaline fades, and the weight of what almost happened settles in. For Rick, the realization was sharp. The danger he dealt with daily was no longer confined to strangers on the highway. It could reach his own family without warning. Something shifted after that day. Rick had always accepted risk as part of his profession, but this was the moment he saw how wide that circle had become. About a year later, in February 2025, another incident shook the family. The details were less public, but Rick would later describe it as the most frightening call he had ever received. The situation involved travel in an older diesel vehicle from 1981, a reminder that mechanical reliability is never guaranteed, especially with aging equipment. At some point during the trip, circumstances turned dangerous enough to trigger panic. The exact sequence mattered less than the feeling it produced. Rick again found himself facing the possibility of sudden loss, this time intensified by the memory of the previous year. Events like these accumulate. One close call may be written off as bad luck. Two begin to feel like a pattern. The incident deepened Rick's emotional burden. He understood machines well, yet machines wear down. Parts fail. Weather shifts. Roads surprise even experienced drivers. The same truths applied to the recovery equipment he trusted every day. If a family vehicle could become a source of fear, so could any truck in his fleet. The call left a mark because it stripped away the illusion of control. Then came March 2025. A powerful snowstorm moved into northern Arizona with little warning. Snowfall quickly exceeded 2 feet in some areas, covering secondary roads near Ash Fork and trapping drivers who had underestimated the conditions. Vehicles slid off shoulders. Tires spun without grip. Some people ran low on fuel while waiting for help. Rick answered the calls. What began as a response to a few stranded motorists turned into an extended operation. Over roughly 40 hours, he worked through the storm with minimal rest. Sleep came in short fragments, if at all. Meals were irregular. Cold air drained energy faster than it could be replaced. One by one, vehicles were pulled back onto the roadway. By some accounts, nearly 30 drivers received assistance, many without being charged. Rick focused on clearing paths and getting people moving again, rather than discussing payment in the middle of a weather emergency. But fatigue changes how the body and mind function. Reaction time slows. Muscles tighten. Judgment becomes harder to maintain at peak levels. Operating heavy recovery equipment in deep snow already carries risk. Doing it while exhausted increases that risk further. Still, Rick kept going. When the storm finally eased, the physical toll was clear. Extended exposure to cold, combined with stress and sleep deprivation, left him drained. The work had protected dozens of people from spending a dangerous night on frozen roads. Yet it raised difficult questions. How long could this pace continue? Financially, absorbing the cost of fuel, labor, and equipment wear was not trivial. Acts of generosity strengthened his reputation, but they also created expectations. When communities see someone provide help for free during crises, they often assume it will happen again. Rick now faced a familiar conflict on a larger scale. Compassion pushed him forward. Sustainability pulled in the opposite direction. Taken together. These events marked a turning point. The fog accident showed that his family was not shielded from the hazards surrounding his profession. The 2025 scare reinforced how fragile safety can be. The snowstorm demonstrated the physical limits of endurance. None of these moments ended his career. None forced him to step away. But each one tightened the pressure. For years, Rick Murphy had been the person others called when everything went wrong. Now, he was confronting a quieter truth. Even the rescuer is not immune to the consequences of constant risk. Long-term consequences, emotional pressure, and the trap of success. By the time Rick Murphy reached the height of his reputation, the tragedies in his life no longer appeared as isolated incidents. They formed a pattern. Each emergency call, each sleepless night, and each close encounter with danger added another layer of pressure. What once looked like success from the outside slowly began to feel like a structure he could not step away from. Rick had become the person people called when accidents were severe and options were limited. Dispatchers knew his number. Drivers requested him by name. Law enforcement trusted his speed and judgment. With that trust came expectation. Turning down a call was no longer a simple business decision. It carried the weight of knowing someone might remain stranded or unsafe. Over time, his willingness to help without demanding immediate payment shaped public perception. When Rick provided free recoveries during extreme weather or urgent situations, gratitude followed, but gratitude often turned into assumption. Some callers began to expect the same generosity every time. Saying yes protected his reputation. Saying no risked damaging it. Financially, the balance was complicated. Equipment maintenance, fuel, insurance, and payroll never paused. Online visibility helped bring attention to Murphy's diesel, but income from YouTube fluctuated. A widely viewed video did not guarantee stability the following month. Exposure strengthened the brand, yet it did not always offset operational costs. Rick found himself in a position where success increased responsibility rather than reducing it. The more dependable he became, the harder it was to create limits. That pressure did not stay at the shop. It followed him home. Nikki carried much of the operational weight behind the scenes. She coordinated schedules, managed calls, and helped keep the business organized while also protecting whatever family time remained. Even routine moments were vulnerable to interruption. Phones rang during meals. Plans shifted without notice. Conversations paused so Rick could gather details about the next recovery. Stress has a way of spreading quietly through a household. No single interruption defines it, but repetition does, physically. The work demanded more from Rick each year. Long hours in freezing temperatures strained muscles and joints. Heavy equipment required constant focus and strength. Fatigue accumulated gradually rather than all at once, making it easy to ignore until it became impossible to dismiss. The mental toll was less visible, but equally real. High-risk recoveries require sustained alertness. After particularly dangerous calls, the mind often replays what happened, reviewing decisions and imagining alternate outcomes. Sleep becomes lighter. Rest feels incomplete. Yet morning still brings another call. For Nikki, the emotional strain came from understanding exactly what the job involved. She knew how quickly conditions could change on a highway or in severe weather. Each time Rick left for a difficult recovery, a quiet uncertainty remained until he returned. As the years passed, Rick began confronting a difficult realization. Stepping away was not as simple as closing a schedule. Employees depended on the company for their livelihoods. Customers trusted Murphy's Diesel during emergencies. The community saw his team as a reliable presence when situations turned dangerous. Retirement, even temporary withdrawal, started to feel less like rest and more like abandonment. This is where success revealed its hidden shape. The business Rick built through sacrifice now required his constant presence to function at the level people expected. Freedom narrowed as responsibility expanded. There was no clear off switch, no moment when the phone would stop ringing for good, no clean boundary separating duty from personal life. Instead, the cost appeared slowly, almost quietly, through missed rest, postponed breaks, and the steady acceptance of risk as normal. Rick was not trapped by failure. He was held in place by everything that had gone right. The same determination that built Murphy's Diesel into a trusted name had created a life where stepping back felt nearly impossible. It was not a dramatic fall that defined this phase of his story, but a gradual tightening, the kind that happens when commitment turns into obligation. In the end, the tragedy was not just what Rick Murphy faced on the road. It was the growing awareness that the success he fought so hard to achieve had become a responsibility he could never fully set down. Conclusion. Reflections on the life of Rick Murphy. Rick Murphy's story is not defined by a single tragic moment. It is the result of years of sacrifice that began long before Murphy's Diesel became a recognized name. He and Nikki built the business from almost nothing, lived without stability, accepted financial uncertainty, and took on the jobs others refused. Those early choices created opportunity, but they also normalized risk. As the company grew, so did the weight Rick carried. Dangerous recoveries became routine. Financial pressure remained constant despite rising revenue. Then the close calls began to reach beyond the job. The fog accident on Interstate 40 nearly took his wife and daughter. Another family scare the following year reinforced how fragile safety can be. The snowstorm that kept him working for nearly 40 hours showed the physical limits of endurance. Through it all, Rick continued rescuing others, yet in many ways, he became like the vehicles he pulls from ditches, stuck in a position that is difficult to escape. Responsibility to employees, loyalty to customers, and commitment to his reputation keep him moving forward even when the cost is clear. His story raises a quiet but important question. How does someone dedicate their life to saving others without slowly sacrificing themselves? Professions built on risk often hide their consequences, behind stories of strength and reliability. Viewers see the successful recovery, not the exhaustion that follows it. The video, The Heartbreaking Story of Rick from Murphy's Diesel, brought wider attention to the human side of that reality. It reminded audiences that behind every dramatic rescue is a person carrying pressure most people never witness. Perhaps the most important reflection is not about tragedy alone, but about balance. Awareness matters. Recognizing the cost of high-risk work can help communities understand the people they depend on during emergencies. Rick Murphy's journey is still unfolding. Success has tested him as much as hardship ever did. The hope now is simple, that the man who has spent years pulling others back to safety can find a way to secure his own, and that somewhere ahead, responsibility and rest can finally exist in the same space.